Hello and welcome once again to the Gaming News Canada show. I'm your host, Steve McAllister. Some 14 months ago, word came down from Wyomissing, Pennsylvania, yes, that's right, that John Levy and his sons Benjie, Aubrey, and Noah were riding off into the sunset and ending their relationship with PENN Entertainment. PENN, gaming industry observers will recall, acquired theScore from the family Levy during the summer of 2021. Last month, John made his first public appearance at the Next.io Summit in New York City since that announcement was made that the family was departing the company. And John's comments in New York raised, in Bob McCown parlance, a Spockian eyebrow or two. We've been waiting to have Mr. Levy make his return to the Gaming News Canada show, and this is our lucky week. So as Ontario's open regulated sports betting and iGaming market turns 3 years old today, we welcome back John Levy. Hey, John, thanks so much for doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Steve. I mean, we've chatted over the years a whole bunch on this topic, that topic, and it's really interesting to see how everything seems to unfold, right? I mean, it's the good news is we're here still to talk about it. So that's the positive side of things. So, but lots and lots going on in this business, and I always enjoyed your interviews and stuff. So it's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you doing it, John, And listen, I want to, let's start with Ontario. There's a few topics we want to cover. Obviously, you do want to talk a bit more about the remarks you made in New York last month. But okay, let's start with Ontario. We're recording this podcast on Monday. We're releasing it today as Ontario officially recognizes 3 years of open regulated gambling. I want to get you to weigh in on kind of the good, bad, and ugly of this market as you see it. But I do want to read back a quote that you gave me for the Toronto Star column I wrote back on May 21st, 2021.
All right, go ahead.
And the quote was about the score. I think I talked to you about I wrote a column about the score and the imminent arrival of legal single event sports betting in Ontario. We talked a bit about your career, but the quote you gave me back then when I asked you about sports betting coming to Ontario in a big way, the quote is, "This is our home turf, man. In Canada, we already have that huge level of engagement and love of the brand. If you add the digital audiences of TSN and Rogers together, they don't come close to us, and DraftKings isn't close to us. There's going to be wide open competition in Ontario, and we're not shying away from that. It's going to be a different ball game with us being able to lead out the gate." When you hear that quote today, what do you think 3 years later? Well, actually 4 years later now.
4 years later. Well, listen, I think when I made that quote, theScore was still under Levy management control, right? So we got to set that stage, right? So you got to put things in perspective. We can look. First of all, I will 100% agree with what I said back then. We've always felt really privileged to be able to produce what we produced in Canada and Ontario with theScore. We had this amazing relationship with our customers back in the TV network and in the digital life. They were all gamers. They all loved to bet on sports. We knew it from the day the ticker freaking had the odds on it, right through till when we launched chat in the app, right? Where over 60% of all the comments were, "Who the hell do you like? Oh, you don't know shit, blah, blah, blah. Let's make a bet." So, we always knew we had that, and we always dealt with it in a sort of in a real way. And that was really what the success of theScore was. So, PASPA fell first, right? And we got our toe wet in the States, which was a little more difficult because our platform was just being developed, right? Because of, having to deal with networks and not being able to have our own platform developed by then. But by the time Ontario launched, we were really ready, set to go. And, when we launched, it did exactly what I thought. We were a different company at the time, but we did launch, and we did take the market share that I thought we were going to get, and it was very competitive. And we've never shied away from that. So, maybe a little different how it's doing today. I mean, that's a different discussion, but certainly on the launch, it worked exactly like we thought it was going to work. I mean, this marriage between media and betting and doing it in an authentic and open, real way, I think I wouldn't have changed it for anything, and I wouldn't have changed that quote for anything either.
I think, John, if you look back, I still think one of the best marketing activations that has been done in this market since, over the 3 years is that Golf Canada activation. I think the first summer of the RBC Canadian Open, and the I don't even know what you call it now. I mean, the skybox from 2,000 feet or whatever.
Like, I thought Aubrey was crazy. Like, when he said, we're going to do this thing, I said, no, you're not. He says, yeah, we're going to do it. And I mean, I don't know, as a side note, did you see they had somewhere in Europe, the crane fell? Did you see that?
No, I miss that.
Yeah, no, and I don't think it was a sporting event. I think it was like, because the other application was dining in the sky or something, right?
Yes.
So you go up, you have hors d'oeuvres and cocktails. And I think the thing didn't collapse. Nobody got killed, but anyway, it tilted or something. And I hear people screaming. Anyway, it was so much fun, and it just worked. It worked, right? Because it was a unique, but that sort of speaks to sort of building these relationships, which is what we did with theScore, right? I mean, golf was always very popular on as you know, on the app and on the network, and people started to bet on golf, and we just had this, just different way of looking at stuff, and it was all, again, getting back to the original premise, which is, what does the user want, and how can you have some fun with this stuff? And then we did it the following year. Remember, we had that hole
right
at Oakdale, I think.
At Oakdale, yes.
Yeah, so we did a little chip that you actually played during the Canadian Open, and you sat around, had a drink, and hit it. So it's just get out of your comfort zone and just try to do stuff that people are going to have some fun with, and that helps the brand, and that translates well into sort of these relationships that we had. And the same thing with the Blue Jays and all that sort of stuff, right? I mean, we did things differently with them, and that was a big deal for us, that 10-year contract. But we loved it, and we got great placement. I was watching the game the other night on Major League Baseball here, right? I still get charged when I see, we're at the game was on a little block, and I see Score Bet in the corner there where somebody was up to bat. So there's room to do this stuff. You just have to get creative.
Hey, John, when you look back at this market over the 3 years, like what, it's kind of is there a good, bad, and ugly aspect to this thing, or things that you think have worked out really, really well, some things that maybe could be better and can be better moving forward? And then are there any like big failings that need to be addressed here?
You know what? I think, because we were obviously, Steve, we were really involved with sort of working with the government and lobbying, and they relied on us, and we were trying to help. And it was a very tight relationship with all the, I found out more about the Senate than I ever knew as we were going through this process. I think it's performing, and it's performing the way it was meant to perform. It's a competitive environment. Some of the guys that were big out of the gate are slipping away a little bit, I understand. And again, I'm not privy to a lot of this information anymore because I don't get those reports. But from what I hear, and from what you probably see, Steve, is some of the guys on the top are sort of falling down a bit. You've got some of the other guys moving up. I don't know where Score is, but I'd have to think it's not been able to maintain what it came out of the gate doing. But and that could be for a whole bunch of other reasons. But I think it's performing the way it should, and I don't think there's any ugly. We thought that 365 was going to be an ugly because they didn't have to wash themselves coming in, but we dealt with that as well. And I think there's a bit of an ugly in terms of how people are still dealing with responsible gaming. I think it's still it's sort of just putting their toe in the water. I don't think anybody's really dealing with that seriously enough, to be quite honest. It is an issue. There's no question. We always knew it'd be an issue. But just to run the odd commercial or the odd ads or a little clip at the end saying, I think there's more that can be done there, quite honestly. I don't know that it's at the point where it's going to bite us in the face or bite them in the face, but over time, it may. So, I think a more responsible way of looking at that is probably one of the criticisms. And the other thing too is I think, I think things are going to change a lot. Sure, there's going to be consolidation. There's going to be winners and losers. There's way too many people in the pot to begin with. But over and above that, I think one of the really exciting things about our business is, I think over the next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be a whole sea change in the whole sports industry, both from a broadcasting, from a consumption, from a betting, from what sports, valuations of teams. I know you want to maybe discuss a little bit about the Leafs deal coming up, right? And I don't think anybody's going to be shy to see that thing escalate again this year, right? And because there's competition there, and it's, but I think that's, there's an awakening coming there too, because, things are not the same. And, I can't talk about my kids anymore, but my grandkids are certainly not going to consume sports and have the same, patterns that we have. Now, that's not to say I'm not taking my grandkids to the Leafs or to the, my grandson was at the Raptors and got a ball yesterday. Actually, it was amazing, but I wasn't there. It was with Aubrey, but it's different. It's different. And I'm not sure it's being addressed properly. And, you see all these new startups happening. And then, now layer on top, and I was on a call this morning about sort of AI applications in the world generally, but specifically with respect to sports. And unless you're taking those blinders off, and unless you're looking at it in a different way, I think there's a rude awakening. So valuations are going to continue to go up. I mean, they're selling teams for billions and billions of dollars still, but it ain't always going to be like that. And I think they're going to have to recognize that.
Hey, John, you have a unique position as both someone who's been an owner in the media space and an owner in the sports betting space. And there's still a lot of angst around sports betting advertising. And just love to get your thoughts on this. And I do think people forget that when the market opened in April 2022, we were still in the midst of a pandemic. And the gambling industry really provided a lifeline to the media industry, and especially in this country. And you're quite well aware of that from your time running the Score. But just love to get quickly your thoughts on the whole, the arm wrestling match around advertising.
Well, everybody came out of the gate bursting with dollars and grabbing Gretzky and as many athletes as they could. And it was old school. It was old school, sort of in your face. You couldn't watch a game without ad after ad after ad. It still happens. It's still happening. We ran some ads, but I don't know if you remember, Steve, we had sort of the comedic approach to it and sort of a lighter sort of look at, how people pick sports and it was more fun, and it was more in tune with sort of the network and what we did. We didn't blow our brains out. We didn't think we had to because of what we talked about earlier, right? But I still think there's a huge opportunity here to be more real about how you present your product. And it's not about these big. I mean, listen, I can't criticize. I mean, MGM seems to be doing quite well, from what I understand, with their big gold ads and people running through casinos. And I think it's a bunch of bullshit. But but it seems to still be working for now. I don't know if you're allowed to swear on these things, but anyway, it still seems to be working. But again, I think you got to take a different approach to it and use different types of mediums. And if I was still in the business, that's what we'd be looking at, and trying to be more real and authentic about it, because you can't yell at people and fool people forever. And at some point, products got to win out. And that's the other thing too. You can, and that was kind of the whole thing with Barstool, right? You can get them on, but can you keep them, right? And that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's on product, and that's on customer service, and that's on continuing to be innovative and doing new things. So, yeah, upfront stuff. I think people get bored of it. People get tired of it. You've probably heard, like I have, people saying these bloody commercials are really. And I love sports betting, but they're really too much in your face. So, get out of that box and try something new.
And John, as you pointed out earlier, you were someone who was a big advocate for regulated gambling back when Bill C-218 and Kevin Waugh and all that process started to play out back in 2020, 2021. Are you surprised, or what are your thoughts in terms of the Ontario model being taken in some form and expanding to other provinces? We know the announcements come out of Alberta now. There's a proposed iGaming Alberta Act that seems to be the next step towards regulated gambling in Alberta. But do you see what's happened in Ontario? Do you see that expanding in those next 3 to 5 years that you referred to a few minutes ago?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think Ontario set up, a pretty good, pattern and something to follow. I mean, as I said earlier, I don't think there's any real black marks on it. For example, that say shouldn't have happened, or that we had to launch in a different sort of way. There's different people in Alberta. There was different regulators. There was Play Alberta versus Ontario Lottery Corporation. So all these things have to settle differently because the players are different and the level of performance is different. You got BC out there as well, which is why can't that go and why hasn't it gone? And maybe that's because BC's lottery performed better than other provinces throughout the years. I don't know why. But yeah, I think just take this model and duplicate it. And I think that's what Paul's been talking about, Paul Burns, for some time. And finally, over time, these things tend to come home to roost. And I think if they can get as close to our model with the right taxation, again, I think what's the province is about a third, right? I think about a third in terms of what the TAM potential is out there. Still significant. I mean, if that's a third of $3 billion is $1 billion, nothing wrong with that. And that puts what? I think you reported or somebody reported that'll put $200 million if it's 20 tax. There's a lot of things that you can't generate $200 million on. So, yeah, use the model and let's go. And I would take it all across Canada, for heaven's sakes. And, from a score perspective, if I was still the score, I'd be pushing like crazy. I mean, our brand is as strong out there as it was in Ontario. So anyway.
Hey, if you were still in the game, how bullish would you be on Quebec?
I'd always talk bullish, I've heard some rumblings lately. Again, I'm not in as much as I was before. I've heard some stuff a little bit that seemed to be a crack, maybe that it might be possible. I've always thought that would be one of the last ones to go. Be a great market, I'll tell you. I mean, even theScore did okay in Quebec, right? So not as well as in the rest of Canada, but it certainly had its followings in the major urban markets. So I don't know anything, Steve. I can't tell you anything more than I've just heard stuff that maybe there's a possibility, which is more than what I heard in the past.
Your comments at the next conference caused a bit of a stir. I don't know if it was because it's been over a year since we heard from you, and that's unusual. But when I've had a chance getting ready for the podcast to reread some of the comments, and I think it's natural that if your company was acquired and you were still involved, that you would like to have a significant say in what was the day-to-day operations. And as you mentioned, theScore was quite successful, and you and the boys had a pretty good track record. And so I think your comment that you were hoping maybe to have a little more involvement, to me that's not an outburst or crazy. I think that's something we'd all have that thought.
Yeah. Listen, it's a whole bunch of different things to unpack there. I mean, in terms of our participation, this was our baby. We created this thing. It evolved from, probably, the story, me sitting on the couch with my dad when he was taking bets from Red the Bookie, right? And that's how it all started. Is your father there, right? And so it's and the relationship with the cable operation, the relationship with the TV network, then in the digital business, and the brand really was owned by people who loved theScore, right? I mean, that was the beauty of it. And it was perfectly positioned. And then we hired these amazing freaking engineers who built this technology platform that was one of the best in North America. So we were perfectly poised to, knock it out of the ballpark in Canada for sure and compete effectively in the US. And You know, and then listen, no regrets on the sale. I mean, the sale was, you know, life-changing. It was good for all of our shareholders. It was good for our family. Nobody thought we'd get the price we got, including some members of my family, to be quite honest, but that's a different story. But it still hurts when you see the potential and you see it sort of dissipate. And I think that's what the experience has sort of been. And when, you know, when we're still a part of it, we were working hard to execute what we said we would, which was to get off of, you know, Barstool's platform and move it to our platform. And then we were just about to leave, and then ESPN shows up, and then we had to do it all over again. So, you know, there's a lot of pride of ownership, not just ownership, but workmanship, right? I mean, we said we were going to do this shit, and we did it. And but it's still not easy to see the thing not working the way it should be working, or the way we thought it could be working. And you know, in going forward. So that's where the comments came from. I mean, it's not, nobody's crying over spilled milk. It's just saying, look, there's an opportunity that's lost here. And I still love the industry. I see the industry, and not only as it is today, but as it will be in the future. Whatever we created was perfectly positioned to take it to that next level, not just to fall back, but to move forward. So, you know, it's kind of frustrating where we're sitting there thinking, well, if we could do this, if we could do that, but it wasn't our call. Those weren't our calls. So that's where those sort of comments came from. And you know, Steve, I'm quite surprised. You know, listen, the only thing I'd add to that is I'm just quite surprised. You know, it's a public company, and that you know, things haven't changed. You know, Jay even spoke about, you know, in his last conference call, he said, you know, if this thing doesn't go the way we think it would, there's levers to pull, right? You know, I think there's lots of levers to pull to put this thing back on course, right? And I'm just surprised that there aren't people out there that have sort of taken it to heart and sort of brought those sort of changes into place. I guess that's because I think, you know, at some point it gets to a point where you may not be able to, you know, get it back on track. I don't know if it's there yet because I'm not privy to all the numbers or anything like that, but, and in a very competitive environment. So who knows? But anyway, that's kind of where that all came from.
Yeah, I know Jay Snowden here, you refer to the head CEO of PENN Entertainment. I mean, Jay's been pretty consistent in his messaging about Ontario that it has been a success for the company, and they're very pleased with that. The other question, just quickly, John, in terms of the timing of you and the boys leaving, was that is there anything to read into that, or was that the plan all along, or was it a case of you know, you and the boys being frustrated and that it was time to kind of bid farewell?
I don't think there was there wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back or anything. This was something that was just sort of like, it's no surprise that at some point we were going to leave. Right. And quite frankly, Steve, most people were surprised we lasted 3 years, to be quite honest. Right. And I think that's sort of a stamp of credibility for the family, because, you know, we sold them this technology and this brand, and Ontario was just about to launch. And it was kind of like, you know, damn it, we're going to do it. We're not going to walk away from this. And the other thing too, Steve, don't forget, these are all our family, or not just family, our employees. You know, we were up to 800 or 900 people. This was us. So, you know, we wanted to make sure that we did what we said we would do. And I say we would have probably exited a little earlier, but for the ESPN deal, because we had accomplished everything that we said we were going to accomplish during the transition period. And because, I mean, you know, we weren't part of the, you know, top echelon, how to move this forward team, right? So if you're not being called upon for your expertise and for your ability to really move things forward, then, you know, it's time to move on. So that's really what it amounted to. And who knows what the future holds? You'll see. You know, I mean, I still love this business. I think there's the last thing I would also say is, Steve, is that one of the really cool things about our business is you got to be in it to be able to take it to the next level, right? Even if you don't, like, I'm the first to admit, I don't know what it's going to be. I know it ain't going to be what it is today. And that's probably why the Score was always successful, because we never said we do shit. We just knew it had to grow and it had to change. And as long as you had a brand and a relationship with a customer, you had a shot, right? And I still feel that way, even more so today. And what we had was just the beginning. It's just the beginning. So whatever it was worth when we did the deal, I think there's huge potential down the road. Huge.
Hey, I promise not to keep you out of the Florida sun for too long, but I got just two more questions.
Okay,
and one is just to what you just spoke about, John, is in terms of you and the boys, like, do you see the four of you continuing to work in the industry? Is there, I find it hard to believe, as much as I know you enjoy your golf and spending time with your family and that, I have to believe that there's one more chapter in the working life of John Levy at least.
So I think you're right on that score for sure. Listen, I like to golf, but I'm not a good enough golfer to dedicate a lot of time to it. And plus I want to golf when I want to golf, not because I don't have anything else to do. So yeah, I'm always got an eye on what's happening. I'm talking to a lot of people. I'm watching where things are in the business that we were in and all that sort of stuff. Whether we can get the band back together in terms of all the boys, I would love it. I don't think it's going to happen. They're still my children, but they've got their own lives, and I'm not saying it's impossible for some, maybe, of us to get together to do something, but they've all got their own families, they've all got their own interests. I know Noah's working on something now that's freaking unbelievable, crazy stuff, which is could dwarf anything that we've done in the past. So and not necessarily in the sports business. So I think you'll see something. I hope something else is going to show itself, just because there's so many opportunities right now, and it's so exciting, and I just love the game. So we'll see. That's
John Levy, the founder of the Score. And John, I want to remind again, going back to that Toronto Star column in 2021, I thought, Elliot Friedman said it best when he said that John Levy's a disruptor, and I think in this case it's a disruptor. It's meant as a compliment, but sincere, really, it is great to get you back on here, John, and have a conversation with you to catch up. And listen, wish you all the best. I'm eagerly awaiting what's next for you. And on my wish list for 2025 is that you and I get to shake hands and see each other face to face at some point.
Perfect. Let's do it for sure. Okay, Steve, thank you so much. As you can see, I really enjoy this stuff. So it's great.
Thanks, John. That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada show. As always, you can find us on the various podcast platforms and also at gamingnewscanada.ca. Thank you again to John Levy for joining us today, and we will see everybody again very, very soon.